Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic Hypersonic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I'm here to talk to you about the latest episode of Doctor Who, the penultimate episode of Season 1A. It was called The Legend of Ruby Sunday. And as the episode starts, the Doctor arrives at unit headquarters in quite a fashion, where he's greeted by Rose from the Christmas special, Martha's daughter, and Kate, before he asks for help with identifying the woman that appears everywhere he's been going. They immediately identify her as someone called Susan Triad, who in this timeline, in this place, is an IT genius, and the name of her company is an anagram for TARDIS. And of course, Susan is the name of the Doctor's granddaughter. Ruby asks why he doesn't recognize his own granddaughter, and he explains that Time Lords can change their appearance, indicating that as a half-Time Lord, she's been regenerated at least once. Apparently, the Doctor's friend Mel, whom we've seen recently when she worked with the 13th Doctor, has been working for Susan apparently as a unit plant. That mystery momentarily aside, the Doctor shifts the focus to Ruby, who of course is still a mystery in terms of her origins. So one of the unit members suggests that maybe the Doctor's granddaughter is Ruby's mother. It turns out that there was some CCTV footage taken on the night of Ruby having been left at the church from a camera 66 meters away. And Ruby has to go back to her house to get the footage on VHS so that unit can try to clean it up, since nothing has ever been gleaned from it in its original form, since it's very grainy. Back at Sue's television studio, before a major broadcast about a gift she intends to give the world, Mel shakes her hand with a secret device in her palm. At Ruby's place, Ruby's adoptive mother decides to go with her back to unit with the footage. And they call Mrs. Flood to watch over Ruby's grandmother, but when her grandmother asks Mrs. Flood for a cup of tea, Mrs. Flood says she's not going to get it for her and talks about a storm that's coming before the room gets dark, and she says it waits no more. In talking with Kate, the Doctor says something about having a granddaughter, but not yet having a daughter, which I guess has something to do with the fact that time is not linear, and that it is in fact
a big ball of wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
Mel then shows up at unit headquarters, and the Doctor and she greet each other joyously before Ruby returns with the videotape of the CCTV footage. They plug that footage into something called a time window, which is basically a holodeck that can look into the past and create a 3D space out of it. Ruby and the Doctor get locked inside the time window with one security guard as Ruby recounts the details of her being left at the church in 2004, and as she does so, snow starts to fall in the time window even though the system hasn't been turned on yet. When they turn the time window on, they get a vision of the night in question that is stronger than any other look into the past that the time window has been able to produce before because of the power of memory, and they soon see the cloaked figure of Ruby's mother walking towards them. As she passes, no one can make out her face just before the TARDIS shows up in the image, and the Doctor exits to run off and deal with the goblins. When he returns, the woman, who had stopped in her tracks, seemingly to have a cry, turns around to point at the Doctor, but no one can figure out why. So they send the security guard in the direction that she's pointing, past where the Doctor and Ruby are standing, but he can't make out anything unusual, and a moment later, the woman disappears. But just after that, in the place where the TARDIS was, some crazy kind of churning, portal-looking thing shows up, and they can't seem to locate the security guard. And no one knows whether this churning portal-looking thing is actually there in the present or just on the image because it was there in 2004. From outside the room, Ruby's mother seems to say that she knows what it is and that it's called the Beast. Ruby then seems to make verbal contact with the missing security guard, but he can't seem to tell them where he is, except that he feels lost in hell. And then he talks about something that's been waiting for a very long time, which has seen into his soul, at which point it seems to sort of explode, and the time memory fades, leaving behind a sort of body of the security guard, though it seems to be made of sand and appears to have been dead for 100 years. The Doctor then asks Mel to take him to see Susan, which would seem to indicate that he thinks things are connected to her. Apparently, the original VHS recording of the night from 2004 has been changed and now contains an image of whatever the crazy churning thing was. When the Doctor introduces himself to Susan as the Doctor, she asks Doctor Who, which is funny, before she says she doesn't have time to talk to him and that all she wants is some time, in fact, but to sleep because she can't seem to sleep due to her dreams. And the Doctor asks her if she dreams about a girl named Lindy and about being in an ambulance. and she seems to know what he's talking about. On the altered version of the tape, Unit seems to find an image of the TARDIS having come back after it originally left 2004 in a slightly different position. Unit then theorizes that whatever was around the TARDIS in 2004 might still be around it, just not visible, so he tells everyone to evacuate. Susan takes the stage at her TV studio as the Unit personnel begin evacuating, as a scan is run of the TARDIS, and the scan registers a life form around it. Meanwhile, the TARDIS is making a weird sound that the Doctor says he's heard before, but doesn't say what the sound means. Susan begins reciting what the life form tells her to say instead of what's on her teleprompter. Back at Unit, one of the members of the team starts reciting a bunch of lore about some type of entity and the Doctor, and it turns out that her name is Harriet Arbinger, whom the Doctor met when he first arrived at Unit. Or H. Arbinger, as in Harbinger. Back at the TV studio, Susan starts remembering that she's dreamt about being her other forms. In the time window, Ruby and another security guard start trying to talk to the entity. Harriet, aka Harbinger, starts reciting a list of celestial beings, including the ones we've seen so far, the celestial toy maker and the music master, as well as a number of other ones we haven't seen, as the entity surrounding the TARDIS becomes visible and starts churning up. Harriet starts to say that the god of all gods is returning, and that in the past, it's gone by many names, including Set and Seth and Setek, but that its one true name is Sutek, which is apparently a very large, evil dog-looking beast, which is apparently the god of death in Egyptian mythology. And it takes over Sue's form, as well as Harbinger's. While back in the time window room, Ruby again sees her mother, at which point Sutek says it's going to bring death to all of humanity, starting with the Doctor, saying that it is the night and the terror and the loss. And that's where the episode ended, as it's to be continued in the finale next week. Now, in Egyptian mythology, Sutek, aka Set, was the ancient Egyptian god of war, storms, chaos, disorder, foreigners, the desert, the color red, eclipses, thunderstorms, earthquakes, sandstorms, and redheads? The character's history on Doctor Who is quite long, including encounters with previous incarnations of the Doctor back before the Eccleston era, and you can look that all up on tardis.fandom.com. So I did enjoy this episode. It had me on the edge of my seat the entire time because the pace never let up. It was just unrelenting as the Doctor and Ruby and everyone else starts to unravel the mystery of who is Ruby's mother, which it turns out has a connection to the return of Sutek, who apparently is connected to Susan, whom it would seem is the Doctor's granddaughter. So it's all very intertwined, and I'm guessing that by the end of next week's episode, we're going to have more information on it. So I'm looking forward to that. It's at times like this that I wish I'd caught on to Doctor Who earlier than I did before the Eccleston era, because I have no idea, other than what I can read about it, what Sutek's history is in the Doctor Who universe, and it kind of annoys me, but I guess I'll have to make do. I'm absolutely dying to know who Ruby's birth mother is, and whether or not a theory I've had about Mrs. Flood is correct, which is that she's the Doctor's daughter, but he said that he doesn't have a daughter yet, so I'm guessing it can't be that. And also, she has something to do with Sutek, so I'm guessing she can't be his daughter. Anyway, from the glimpses of stuff that I've read about with this character's history with the Doctor from the past seasons, it's going to be a wild ride next week. And I just hope that nothing happens to Ruby. I don't think anything does, because apparently she's in a couple of episodes next season before she departs. So fingers crossed nothing bad happens to her. And I sure hope we find out who her birth mother is. And at this point, I have no idea. Will it be someone that we've seen before on the show? Will it not be someone we've seen before on the show? We're going to have to wait and see. But once again, I think Ncuti Gatwa nailed his performance as the Doctor. I think everyone in this episode was great. And I think it was just a great opening for the finale of the season. Like I said, it kept me on the edge of my seat and, had a relentless pace, which I really enjoyed. But that's really it. So I'm going to get out of here. I'll be back, of course, next week to do a breakdown and review of the season finale. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.